Okay, our next contestant hails from Massachusetts, where she ran her own marketing consulting business. Having interned for Fox Studios and DreamWorks Animation, Nicole Stier is able to traverse the big budget and the independent film spectrum with ease, which I'm sure she will put to good use in her new job as a development assistant at 20th Century Fox. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our next producer with her project Deepflight, Nicole Stier.
All right, hi, my name is Nicole Stier. I will be pitching Deepflight, which is a big budget PG-13 sci-fi adventure in the vein of James Cameron, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey to the uncharted world of the deep sea. So we open with a team of scientists in an Enter-Pro submarine who have just achieved the newest deep dive record. And before them is this deep sea ecosystem teeming with life. Think bioluminescent sea anemones, 15-foot tall tube worms, ghost crabs, vampire squids, all illuminated by glowing magma. And then suddenly, a dark shadow is cast over the vessel. And emerging from the darkness is this massive sea creature with uncanny speed and ability. He attacks the submarine, and the crew has no choice but to watch on in pure terror as a crack forms in one of the portholes. And within seconds, the entire vessel implodes. So our lead in this story is Dr. Sarah Mead, and she is a beautiful, self-reliant scientist and submarine captain who's spent her entire life doing oceanic research. That is until her husband was killed in the aforementioned submarine implosion. So now, 10 years later, she's traded in her submarine and her corporate research for a sailboat and a transitory lifestyle, tracking a pod of whales. And along for the ride is her 14-year-old son, Max, her Polynesian first mate, Little Joe, and their dog, Akula. So unfortunately, this particular pod of sperm whales has been mysteriously disappearing at an alarming rate over the past year, and Sarah has yet to find a cause. So with a ticking clock and no leads, she decides to reach out to Archer, who is a young, funny, new age scientist and expert in sonar technology. And Archer is a huge fan of Sarah's. He's always loved her work, and he finds himself immediately attracted to her despite their age difference. Sarah, on the other hand, is not quite as smitten, especially when he starts spouting these out there theories about how the whales are trying to communicate with her. He believes that they're trying to warn her about the dangers that lurk in the ocean's depths. So, sorry, I lost my spot.
It's okay, take your turn.
Thank you. So knowing that the research could be accelerated if they had better facilities, she decides to reach out to her former research partner and the Enter-Pro millionaire, Dr. Harry Snopes. And he immediately informs her about his new invention, which is this Cetus drill. And it essentially, it's planted in the deep sea, and it harvests this powerful fossil fuel from the underwater vents that I mentioned in the opening scene. And he is actually unveiling this machine to a group of billionaire investors in 3 days' time. And if all goes as planned, they're going to increase production and plant hundreds to thousands of these drills around the world. Now, Sarah is obviously concerned because this is a new technology, and she's worried that he doesn't yet understand the repercussions of placing an alien object in the deep sea. So later that evening, Shiner, a whale that Sarah is particularly attached to, washes up on shore dead, his underbelly ripped open. And in his hide, she finds this long, sharp tooth. So putting two and two together, Archer and Sarah realize that something has disrupted the deep sea ecosystem and is forcing the surviving creatures to seek food closer to the surface. And I don't know if you've ever seen deep sea creatures, but they're literally the scariest and ugliest looking animals you have ever seen. And the owner of this tooth in particular would make Jaws look like a guppy. So Sarah decides to give Harry one last shot and informs him about her discovery, and she quickly learns that he is not on her side. So she decides to take matters into her own hands and steals Enterpro's latest and fastest one-person submarine, the one Sarah herself once designed, called Deepflight. And she has to face her greatest fear of captaining a submarine once again and facing the creature that killed both her husband and the whales. Little does she know, Harry is actually hot on her tail, and from hiring Somalian pirates to attack her ship to going in after her to blow up Deepflight, he will stop at nothing to save his billion-dollar machine. So with limited oxygen, Sarah must survive Harry's onslaught, escape the sea creature, and blow up Deepflight before it's too late.
How much of the action takes place on the water?
Above the water?
In the water in general, under, below. Like, what's the water work on the movie?
So I would say about 25% takes place actually above the water. The underwater sequences, because it's in the deep, essentially it will all be CGI, a lot of interior shots of the submarine. But it's essentially the same as creating a space movie because it's a similar world as to what you'll be seeing underwater.
At the very end, she's in this deep flight by herself, right?
She is. It's a one-person submarine.
And then just at the very end, she has to not be attacked by the monster. And there were three things that had to.
Yes.
She had
So
to do.
the monster, it's actually a couple of sea creatures that are under there with her. But basically, I like to describe it as Jurassic Park underwater. You know, they're not mutant creatures, but they are. This is their world, and you are an intruder in it. So she has to essentially escape it, and then when she's about to blow up the Cetus drill, Harry comes in and one of the submarine workers that they essentially just sink to the bottom, and then he's trying to blow up her submarine as well.
And at the very end, is she surfacing? Is that?
Yes, but she starts to run out of oxygen, so she has to free ascend the final 400 feet and leave the submarine.
Does that work out well?
It does. She makes it. It was a rough journey, but she does make it.
Could you talk about the writer and how it started and your relationship?
Yeah, so the writer is Suki Kaiser, and this script was originally at Lightstorm about 15 years ago. Cameron was developing it. And the draft that he was working on, it was a first draft for her, and this is kind of her passion project. And she hadn't really worked on it since, and she submitted it to Nichols, and it made it to the semifinals. And I found it and met with her. I come from a family who has a science background. Everyone in my family is involved in science in some way, so I found myself drawn to that material. And I also, once I started looking into the deep sea, I just found it so fascinating because we know more about the surface of the moon and Mars than we do the water that covers 71% of our own planet. And scientists believe that there are close to 9 million species in the ocean that have yet to be discovered. And I just find that so incredibly fascinating that there's this whole nother world that exists there. And I don't think it has been explored cinematically the way that it could be. So that was initially the interest. The writer actually wanted to be here, but she's currently sailing with her family. They're tracking a pod of whales.
Wow.
So a lot of the information in the script was taken from real life. And she also, Deepflight was invented by Graham Hawkes, and he's also good friends with Cameron. And she spoke to him and met with him. He read the script and said that he would consider talking to Cameron again, resubmitting it once it was ready.
As a producer, what do you feel like your next step is on this project?
I think the biggest thing is figuring out exactly what type of movie we're going to make. In an ideal world, this would be a film that's anywhere from 120 to 145 million if we wanted all of the water elements. I did actually break down the script and do a VFX bid for it, and we could make it for 45 million without losing too much. But I think for me the biggest thing is to decide which producing strategy we want to go with. Obviously, if it's the former, we can't make this movie without a senior producer and a successful director on board. And ideally, we would like a producer-director who can essentially brand the film and make it their own. Someone like Cameron or Len Weissman, or even I know Timur Bekmambetov has been looking for a water film. And I think, although it's incredibly challenging, if done correctly, it can really help differentiate it from the mainstream.
Is this a 3D movie or?
I think it would have to be. I mean, I think it could really add to it. Obviously, if we did go with the latter option, this $50 million film, we might have to reconsider that. But the writer and I had always talked about it with 3D in mind. I think it could add to the story.
Do we know what happens to Archer and the billionaire?
Yes, the billionaire. So there's two sea creatures at the bottom in the final attack, and the first one that was chasing Sarah actually gets hit by one of Harry's. It's essentially this almost like a bomb type thing, but so the first one gets hit, and then its mate comes out and essentially kills Harry, so he dies. And then with Archer and Sarah, things are kind of left up in the air. I mean, you think that there is the potential of a romance, but it's not a super cheesy kiss and everyone's happy ending.
Thank you, Nikki.